Welcome back to Uprising. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. More than 20 years ago in the Los Angeles area town of El Monte, a large conglomeration of local and national law enforcement and others conducted a raid on a series of duplexes that secretly housed a major sweatshop. 72 Thai nationals had been held in captivity for years and forced to sew garments for companies with little to no pay. The raid uncovered the first modern case of labor trafficking and slavery in the United States and kicked off an awareness campaign as well as legislation to address the global issue. On the 20th anniversary of the El Monte slavery case, we turn today to a survivor of the raid and a member of the main local organization that was involved, the Thai Community Development Center. Joining me in studio today is Rotchana Sussman. She is a survivor of the raid, and Chancee Martorell, who is the Executive Director of Thai Community Development Center, or Thai CDC. Welcome to Uprising.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, first, Rotchana, can you share your backstory? I'm sure you've told this story millions of times. But what led you, at least in a nutshell, to find yourself in the horrible conditions in El Monte 20 years ago? How and why did you leave Thailand for the first time?
I heard an agent that they were sent. They're so friendly and they make like warm welcoming as someone like them as very well. So like they will offer such a higher pay money at that time. It was like, my gosh, I got paid so little, like about $300 a month. They offer me like 1,000 to 1,200 a month.
So you were struggling financially?
Financially a little bit. First thing I was thinking about my children education and my family. We're farming, we struggle a little bit. So I decided, well, for that sake, I should find more money for my kids. I don't want them to have less education than myself. So I want them to have more education and my farm will be developed and doing well.
So you were essentially lured onto or promised a job. You boarded a plane, and then when you arrived in Southern California, what happened?
We were picked up from the airport. What we can see was just the airport, and then we were brought to the compound, 7-unit compound in El Monte. And we were there, never leave, and we were locked up at night. They used the key to lock the door from the outside, and just in case an emergency fire get caught in a fire or something, we probably will be dead. And then in my room, I share with other 9 people who slept in the same room with myself. And then we would have to work from 7 to 1 a.m. in the morning, average daily, which is no day off, which is once a month they let us have a day off.
So 7 in the morning to 1 at night.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Chancee, let me ask you how your involvement happened. I understand that you were actually there on the day of the raid, and law enforcement and other agencies approached you when they heard that this particular sweatshop in terrible conditions was operating. So what sort of led you into this story?
Sure. We were visited by Deputy Labor Commissioner T.K. Kim at our office on August 1st, the day before the raid, who came to meet with me in 1995, who came to the office and asked about Thai CDC participating in this multi-agency raid the next day, August 2nd, 1995, and made me aware of 6 dozen workers being held against their will in captivity in virtual slavery. Now, at the time, Thai CC had already been championing workers' rights and immigrant rights, and we were aware that there are such things as underground factories and sweatshops. But from what T.K. Kim had described to us, it was very atrocious that they were actually confined behind barbed wire, and on the premises were 24/7 armed guards. And so we decided that we would be participating in the raid, and our main task would be to go in to not just help liberate the men and women in that clandestine makeshift factory, but also to really finally provide them with the care and all of the relief that they needed, but also to really understand what what their plight amounted to, and then see if we could help them reconstruct their lives.
Rotchana, when the raid happened, what did you think was happening? Did you understand what was going on?
I kind of understand what was going on because we were threatened by the captor that saying that if we try to escape or something, they're gonna, if we try to run away, we can get raped by black people or Mexican people.
Wow.
They're not that nice, and then if someone came knock on the door, you do not open the door if they left, if they didn't come to help me. And that what would happen to me after that, because I heard the rumors about how, terrible situation they were in. So, and then at that time when the police came in, it was a huge shock to all of us. So I was hidden in the closet. I didn't even realize that I put on my jeans over my pajama and everything. I don't know. I was in a big mess, and then terrifying and horrifying nightmares, that day. But we didn't know what was going on. Anything happened today is better than we get stuck here.
And the people who lured you, they were essentially Thai business people. It was a business owning family,
Right.
and so they used racist rhetoric to frighten you and to did they also threaten your families in Thailand, saying that if you escaped, that your families would be hurt?
They threatened the other workers who attempted to escape, but I didn't make any attempt to do anything or to challenge them. But the message was really clear. If we have done something to try to get their family in trouble, they would definitely do something to our family.
And Chancee, what
Yes.
did you encounter then on the day of the raid? Were you horrified by what you saw?
I was horrified because the fact that the workers were heaped on these indignities and intolerable conditions. They had lived in just the most atrocious conditions. You saw the barbed wire. You saw the sundries, the shops that they operated inside, where the workers actually had to purchase their supplies and personal goods because they couldn't go outside.
And the money they earned was being used to pay off their airfare.
Exactly.
Wow.
That was used to pay off their airfare, their debt, and then it just got tacked on if they purchased additional supplies, which were charged to them at exorbitant prices. And then also the fact that they were not allowed to interact with each other, the fact that there was a guard station there on the driveway that would keep 24/7 surveillance.
Armed guards?
Armed guards. They had weaponry, and also the conditions were just unlivable, unbearable. They were working down below in that makeshift factory in the garage in very cramped quarters. There was absolutely no ventilation. All the windows were boarded up.
And they were making clothes for companies, for U.S. companies.
Yes,
here.
that is correct. They were indeed.
So, what happened after the raid? Because then it wasn't as though all of a sudden it was over. You were free to go. After the raid, I think to some of your surprise, you were then, Rotchana, you and your fellow, captives were then taken into immigrant detention, and you were locked up. You exchanged one prison for another. You were locked up by immigration. Can you tell us what happened then? That must have been really confusing.
Actually, we didn't know what was going on, but we were there for during the daytime for an interview. What they were deciding what to do with us. They were kind of confused because that was the first case in decades. Never have anything like that after the previous slavery existence.
Yeah.
So it was just like they didn't know what to do with us. They were not sure what they want to do. They were sending us to the detention center in the San Pedro. It's the island. So it was back and forth, daily basis. It's just like a prisoner. So, and at least 9 days, in that trauma and undecisive, and they decided, then we'll be because Philip Bonner was suggested to them that we should be a material
Witnesses in the case
In
that
the
would
case.
be prosecuted afterwards. So,
Right.
and Chancey, let's follow up with you on that. This was the first time, because this was such a historic case, it was the first time in sort of modern day U.S. that a case of trafficking and slavery was going to proceed based on this particular raid. And the authorities didn't know what to do with these 72 people. What would have happened to them if they had just been sent back to Thailand?
Oh, the threat of retaliation was very real. They would have been sentenced to death if they had been deported to Thailand because the two of the suspects had evaded arrest
And had
among
escaped
that
to
family and
Thailand.
had escaped to Thailand and knew where their homes were, their families and their homes. So the threat of retaliation was very real. There was no way that we would have wanted that to happen. And so our campaign was to really help the workers understand their rights that were very fundamental, that they needed to really understand that in the outside world, beyond the prison walls, that they can assert and pursue justice, assert their rights and pursue justice, and seek accountability from the corporations and the manufacturers, but also find redress and restitution at the end if they would be able to see themselves no longer as slaves, but really as agents for change.
And so there was some sort of uncharted legal territory that you and your colleagues were charting to find a way for these 72 people to remain in the country, right? And how did that then impact sort of future cases?
Well, absolutely. It was totally uncharted territory at the time, being that's the first case of modern-day slavery at the time. It was a wake-up call to the world that slavery at modern-day
In the
slavery
United
in
States.
particular and human trafficking exist in our midst and could be found right in our own backyards. And yet there was no remedy or protections at the time for victims of trafficking or modern-day slavery. We were fortunate enough to actually work with a special agent immigration who was a renegade agent, believe it or not, contrary to what we were used to dealing with in immigration, who actually understood
He was
the
sympathetic.
workers and very sympathetic and understood Thai culture because he lived in Thailand. And so he understood their plight and sought the S visas, which was available at the time for drug traffickers and snitchers in drug trafficking cases who served as witnesses.
So that was a
And
clever use of the law.
It was a clever use of the law to see that they be given these S visas if the quota was not out yet for these S visas, and that's what kept them in the country and allowed them, after 3 to 5 years of continued presence, to adjust to permanent legal residency and avoided deportation completely after their case was successfully prosecuted criminally.
Rotchana, what were those few years like after it was determined you could stay in the United States? And what was the case like? Because it was a long, drawn-out case that then was successful, which also, of course, set a lot of precedent. But what were those first few years like for you?
Oh my God, I have to learn a new culture and also along the way.
And a language?
In a language as well, the understanding and how we have rights in this country, but we have to speak up for ourselves. That's why I became a spokesperson. And every weekends we have to plan that when we're gonna protest or picketing or press conference or meeting with a group. So to remind everyone, let's not forget about our case. You know, this is our modern day slavery. You should not forget. You should support us. You should witness it and then be part of this. I can't do this alone, you know, unless all of you would come out and support this, you know. So, and that's how we won our case. It's since a long-standing fighting for many, many years, you know. It was tiring, but I can't stop then because I have to continue to let people know, to let people hear about it and speak up about everything that I experienced. It was a trauma. I do not want anything like this to happen to anyone in our society and in our country, our great nation. So that's how I believe That's what I did.
And Chancey, what was the outcome of the case? Several people who were arrested, the ones that didn't manage to evade arrest, were essentially imprisoned for several
Yes,
years.
that is correct. They pled guilty and were sentenced between 5 to 7 years, depending on their role in the case and how they treated the workers. Auntie Suni, the mother of the 7-member family, 5 of whom were arrested, actually received the harshest sentence, 7 years. And then after fulfilling that sentence, they were all deported back to Thailand. That was the criminal case. We also had the civil case where the workers filed a lawsuit against the manufacturers and retailers and won a $4 million settlement.
And that is a really important part of this conversation because, of course, there is a market for sweatshop products that are corporate entities that will do whatever they can to get low-cost products, which in turn drives sweatshop conditions. So you won a $4 million settlement from these companies. Are any of them still around, or do they all go out of business?
Some of them are still around.
Can you name some names?
Many of them are out of business. Mervyn's Miller's Outposts are out of business, and some of the ones who, and Bum and Body Glove are out of business. Clio, Fellini, Tomato, those may be in business.
Those were
at
the
this
companies
time.
that were buying the garments that
correct.
Rotchana and her fellow captives were sewing.
And
That
I
is
believe some of them also changed their names afterwards because they can't.
Because of the PR problem.
Yes, and
Right.
Robinson's May was one of them, which is now Macy's. So
Robinson's May, which is
Yes.
now Macy's, was
Right.
also buying garments. And do you have any, in the case, did it come across that any of them were aware of the conditions that their products were being made in?
they claim not to, but they were just turning a blind eye because the shop were producing volumes and volumes of garments that could not have been produced by the Latino workers who were working in the front shop that really hid the clandestine shop where these 72 Thai nationals were working in. And the fact
So
that...
explain that. So there was a
Yes,
front shop
that
that
is
was
correct.
supposed to be the legitimate bona fide garment factory
That's correct, in
that employed
downtown LA.
primarily Latino workers.
That's correct.
And then behind the scenes, there were Thai workers working in these appalling conditions.
Absolutely, exactly, in the clandestine makeshift factory.
So how did the cases, the criminal cases, then set the stage for future prosecutions around the country on such issues? This was the first major case and first case of modern slavery and trafficking. And since then, what sort of precedent did this case set?
Oh, it set many precedents because it spawned the anti-trafficking movement, and it really made people aware that these are victims that should not be criminalized and treated like undocumented immigrants because, of course, it's an international and global phenomenon and problem.
Well, it's a different set of circumstances
Right, different
that
set of
has drawn
circumstances.
them
So law
than
enforcement...
many other undocumented
Right,
immigrants.
and then law enforcement got better training to be better equipped to respond to these cases, to identify victims, to interdict trafficking, as well as to be sensitive to victims as soon as they come across victims and turn them over to community organizations for their care. And it also led to the founding in 1998 of the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, which Thai CDC co-founded, that not only provide a continuum of care network for victims of trafficking and started the first shelter for victims, but continue to train law enforcement and also continue to educate the public about this pernicious problem that continues unabated, and also that continues to advocate for policy changes. So in 2000, Congress passed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act as a result that tries to combat human trafficking, prevent human trafficking, monitor human trafficking, and protect victims.
This, again, I feel like it's important to go back to the fact that there is a demand for low-cost products that, of course, Congress and others don't address, that there's a consumer demand and a
That's
corporate
correct.
demand for, if the sweatshops aren't here in the United States, they're in Thailand or they're in Bangladesh, where workers are, forced to work under similarly horrific conditions. And that's the broader context of all of this.
Yes, and this is exactly what we are trying to tell the world when we speak up on the issue of, of human trafficking, modern day slavery. The El Monte case really is the first labor struggle of global proportions. Our city has seen it proved that if capital could redraw the old boundaries in its favor, so could the people. And so we really were challenging global capitalism, and we continue to do so because these cases really stem from the fact that you have a supply chain, right, that goes back to slavery, and it's slavery tainted. If consumers are not aware of the products that they're purchasing, then they may be actually complicit in allowing slavery to occur and continue. And so as a result, the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, with support from Thai Community Development Center, campaigned for the supply chain bill, which got passed a couple of years ago in the state of California, whereby businesses doing $1 million of business in the state of California will need to show their supply chain and determine to the state of California whether any of it is slavery tainted. Then they
So
cannot
really
practice business here.
addressing the broad issues. Rotchana, I want to ask you, you started out saying that one of the things that drew you to the United States and you were lured into the situation that you found yourself in because you had children, because you were worried. What happened to your children?
They were reunited with me after 6 years. I haven't seen them. So they came and they live with me now.
So you went for 6 years without seeing them. And
Without
actually, we
seeing
should even
them.
step back. How many years were you held captive in the sweatshop?
I was there only 1 year and 5 months.
And some people were there as long as like 7 years.
7 years.
So
but
then-
the time that the very critical time was the time that I was arrived in, because 3 months before I came, one person has escaped. So that's led to the story. That's how they discovered that we have a slavery
The
compound.
person who escaped, told somebody who told somebody that finally led to the raid.
Right.
And so
right.
several years after that, you were
Seven.
reunited with your children?
Yes. I haven't seen them for 6 years, ever since I came to United States at that time. So, and then they live here in United States now.
They live here with
They
you?
live here with me.
Yeah.
So they've been here. So for over 15 years, I say. So
this happened 20 years ago, but
Right.
I can imagine that the trauma of going through what you did and what the 71 other people did never really goes away.
no, but one thing that we can do is that we keep our eyes on, you always investigate. Like I see someone who clean my table, I would try to speak to them, and do you get paid well? On my clothes, I always go up online where they make this stuff, or try to be aware of, like sometimes things low cost, a good thing that low cost, but sometimes you support the low cost, you might support slavery. Someone who can be the chef, the food that you eat when you go out to the restaurant. I always ending up and bumping into someone. I always investigate. You get paid well. You here illegally, or you have your ID with you, or something like that. Because my previous experience have taught me that all my identification were confiscated. Since I arrived, so I have no right to be here, and I don't want to see anyone who's going to have to go through what I have gone through, so I always asking.
And so that's one of the ways in which you cope with the trauma, just to constantly keep alive this issue in your mind and make sure you see how other people
Yes.
are.
Yes, and then I speak up, and then I help whoever the victim in the case, because ever since our case existed, we have a new existence of victim case appear, too. So I just, if anyone needs a support, emotional support or something, I always gonna be there.
And I understand that your story and the story of the others was shared in a play called Fabric that was written some time ago, has been showing at the Pasadena Playhouse for our Southern California audience. And I'm wondering if the two of you can finally just share your thoughts on this play and what it's been like to sort of see the story that you've both been involved in from different sides be retold to an audience?
Oh my God. Me, I couldn't control. I was crying because some of the story that happened, it was so emotional, very dramatic that, wow, that was happening to me 20 years ago. And it was the truth that how they treated us, you know. So it was just like so real. I couldn't control crying, even though they called me up on the stage after the play over. I couldn't control it. I just continued to cry for a little bit, and I was able to speak. So
to see your story through others' eyes, yeah.
Yeah, it's really an example of using art for social justice. And Henry Ong, the playwright, did an amazing job in really dramatizing the plight of the workers, but also capturing the multifaceted aspects of the case, because the case is multidimensional. There are so many individuals involved and entities involved. Initially in discovering the shop, in investigating the shop, and in busting the shop, and then of course the workers themselves in the transformative experience and journey that they've gone through.
Give out a website very quickly for the
Sure.
your organization.
Sure. You could like us on Facebook as well, thaicdc.org, www.thaicdc.org.
Thank you both so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us today.
Thank you for
Best of
having
luck to
us.
you.
Thank you.
for having us.
My guests are Rotchana Sussman. She's a survivor of the 1995 Thai slavery raid, and Chancee Martorell, executive director of the Thai Community Development Center that was intimately involved in the case.